A year ago, about this time, we were putting together resolutions, devising great plans. 2020 was going to be a great year, a new beginning and a fresh start for many, if not everyone. And we looked forward to it, cementing it all with prayers at midnight as we do here in Ghana. And perhaps we will be doing tonight. We had health goals. And for most of us, our health insurances were intact, but it wasn't enough for what was to come. In fact, no one was prepared for what would hit and change the entire world, not even the scientists with years of research at their disposal and in the most advanced countries in the world. A tiny little virus, which doesn't even have representation in the human eye. I mean, it's invincible, and yet it became a notorious killer, disrupting the very fabric of our society as we'd known it. Coronavirus toppled news about road accidents, about earthquakes, about crimes that shook the nation, whatever, crowned itself the biggest news of 2020. We've lost some, won some, and here we are still fighting. But we don't want to forget the other issues that made news before coronavirus meant anything to us. Welcome, everyone. My name is Gifty Andopia, and tonight we take you back into time before we cross over into 2021. We review the big stories of 2020 from January to December. My colleagues Kojo Yangson and Israelai are here with me in the studio. Our court correspondent Joseph Akable will be joining us via Zoom. I'll also be joining my other colleagues, Elton Brobe, Joseph Opoku Gakpo. They'll all be joining us, Mamavio Uswabwaje, via Zoom, and we'll have them comment. What we'll do is that we'll invite you to tell us what your biggest stories of the year has been. We'll pay some respect to notable people that we have lost in the year at the end of the entire program. So I have a list of the big news of the year here, and I'll take you through it quarter by quarter. Kojo Yangson is here already in the studio. Kojo, it's good to have you. How has it been for you so far?
It's a pleasure to be here, and this is a year that will be remembered for notoriety. You know, the difficulty that COVID-19 brought to every human on the planet. I mean, this is going to mark this year, you know, for all time. But there were great moments in between, and there are things we achieved, you know, as a nation, as an organization, and as individuals. Certainly. Are worth celebrating. I'm glad we're going to go through.
Certainly. So let me take you through our 2020 year in review. We start in January. In January, one of the key things that started happening was that there was an accident that got the entire nation talking. That gory accident happened in Dompoase on the Cape Coast Takoradi Highway. 34 lives were claimed on that particular day. It was just one day. Now, at the end, the driver was jailed for negligence, but then this troubling incident was one of the reasons why JoyNews launched our road safety campaign, Arrive Alive. What other things happened in January? Talking about the first week of January, 2 halls of the Accra Academy got bent. Take a look. That's what happened in Accra Academy. In the same month, the Electoral Commission of Ghana announced that it will begin compiling a new voters register. Immediately, that announcement was made. The opposition NDC, as you know, teamed up with 5 political parties, vowing to use all political and legal means to stop the commission from going ahead. Also, the U.S. government lifted visa restrictions that it imposed on Ghana after a standoff over deportation of Ghanaians living in that country. We're still in January, but I'm moving on to February. Like I said, we'll take these quarterly. So we'll do January, February, and March, and then I bring my colleagues in to take their thoughts. But you're welcome to bring your thoughts as well. Let's move on from January into February. What happened in February? The Media Coalition Against Illegal Mining criticized the withdrawal of the Operation Vanguard Task Force from all illegal mining areas across the country. The concern was that, well, we're losing the fight if we keep on going like this. But there were also issues and allegations about what the task force members were doing on the ground. We'll talk about that with my colleagues. Like I said, Then another thing that happened was that the Speaker of Parliament declared that journalists who left the chamber to cover side event by the MPs while the House was still in session would have their accreditations withdrawn. It was one of the big stories of the day. I remember that quite clearly. And that's why Joseph Opoku-Gakpo will also be joining us via Zoom. Let's take a look at what more February brought us. We'll stick to these two. But like I said, Joseph will give us his thoughts. Let's move on to March. March was when it all started. Ghana recorded its first COVID-19 cases, 2 of them. And you remember that midnight press conference by the health minister, accompanied by the information minister, Kojo Ponkruma, and the others. We all remember it like it was just yesterday. Well, we heard from the Noguchi Memorial Institute because the concern was that, is Ghana ready to deal with this? The Noguchi Memorial Institute came in and started talking about what it can do. It said it was ready to test any suspected cases. Apart from COVID-19, other things were still going on. So in the same month, the Operation Vanguard team indicated that it had retrieved some of the 500 excavators which had gone missing at district assembly offices across the country. Now, we don't know the status of that 500 excavators as yet. Maybe my colleagues will share some perspectives on that. We're still in March. Now, another thing that happened in March is that a special operation by the 66th Artillery Regiment of the Ghana Armed Forces rounded up 20 recruits of the Homeland Study Group at a remote location in the Volta region. Now, if you remember, this story came up again, getting to the end of the year, somewhere in August or October or so. So it didn't just start from there. It started all the way back in March, except that it got drowned up in coronavirus. But this is what happened in March. 20 of them, if you remember, were arrested. What we were told was that they were released subsequently. The NIA, the National Identification Authority, announced that it will begin registration of Ghanaians for the Ghana card. And I don't know if you already have your Ghana card, but let's see how that one goes as well. Later in the month, the Pasha Lockdown was imposed in Accra and Kumasi and their environs, and that is something that many of us, now, if not all of us, will forever remember and have in our mind. We'll take you to April shortly, but we've done January, February, and March. I want you to listen to President Akufo-Addo, and when we return, my colleagues Idro Lai and Kojo Yangsen will take their thoughts on what happened between January and March.
So far, they have found that the 57 suspected cases, as of today, Wednesday, 11th March, have proved negative. However, it is imperative that we step up our preparedness to ensure that beyond these initial satisfactory measures, we adopt a whole-of-Ghana approach in adequately preparing for a possible hit within our borders. In order to do so, at my prompting, the Minister for Finance has made available the CD equivalent of 100 million United States dollars to enhance our coronavirus preparedness and response plan. That is to fund the expansion of infrastructure, purchase of materials and equipment, and public education. I have, as of yesterday, ordered the suspension of all international travels by public officials, except for critical assignments, which will have to be authorized by the Chief of Staff at the Office of the President. All public officials are to remain within the jurisdiction until further notice. Video conferencing facilities and other technological tools are to be utilized whenever possible for international engagements. I've also instructed further enhancements of the protocols for inbound traffic from already affected countries. Fellow Ghanaians, all of us should, as much as possible, desist from all foreign travels, except the most critical ones, until there's a grip on the virus.
That's President Akufo-Addo there talking about coronavirus. So between January and March, we're looking at the accident that claimed so many lives in one day. About 34 people died in one day. We're talking about the fire that gutted Accra Academy. We're talking about the Electoral Commission. It was at that time they started, the conversation saying that they were going to compile a new voters register, people fought it, etc. We're also looking at the Galamsey activities, and we're looking at what happened in Parliament. And then coronavirus came in. Israelite, Kojo Yankson, it's good to have you guys.
Yeah, good to be here on the show with you.
Yeah, I know. You can,
and with KY.
You can have it. It can't be anything apart from good if you're with me.
Indeed. There's no denying
Israel,
that.
I've spoken to Kojo already.
Yeah.
What will be your highlight? I mean, if I can take coronavirus, yes, if I can take coronavirus out.
You can take corona.
I'm assuming I can take it.
I would, okay, so I would want to go on the Electoral Commission's registration exercise.
Okay.
And, there was so much, concern that was expressed about the exercise, especially because it was going to happen at a time that we're having a pandemic on our hands.
Yeah.
But quite apart from that, or in the initial stages, the concern had to do with whether we really needed to have a new register. And there was so much that was said. My personal position on all of that was, I didn't think that we needed a new register, or if we needed a new register, it should have been a register that was going to use the national ID. Okay. Or based on the national ID, so that we didn't have to come back another time, because we're doing the national ID. It was costing us a lot of money, and so why would we do putting so much money to get the national ID, and then also put in so much money for the voters register, which really I'm not sure we're going to use again.
But, and I recollect civil society organizations at the time saying that why don't we do a partial re-registration for those who are first-time voters, for example, that would have been much less compared to the number of people that we had to register if we did it.
On it, I really wouldn't. I don't see how that will work for the Electoral Commission. My issue is if the Electoral Commission believes that it needs a new register and it's the only way they can get to do it, that's fine. My argument is, and I've been an advocate of the national ID system because I know what transformation it can bring to this country. Okay. So my thing was, let's have the national ID and then use whatever information we're getting from the national ID to build the national register, which I believe was going to be even more credible. I mean, that's the most credible electoral register we can have if we're basing it on the national ID. So that was what I was going. Okay,
fast forward, we did it, and it looks as if they were on target. Let me just introduce our other colleagues who have joined us. Kojo, I'll come to you. Joseph Akable is our court correspondent, joining us via Zoom. Joseph Opoku Gakpo also joining us via Zoom. Gentlemen, it's good to have you. Thank you. Okay, so let me come to you, Kojo, and I'll come to you. Okay, I'll come to you, those of you on Zoom. Essentially, we're looking at what happened in the first quarter, January, February, and March. The accident that claimed 34 lives, the fire, the Electoral Commission's, announcement of starting a new register, Galamsey activities, Parliament, which I'm sure Joseph will come in there, and then coronavirus finally. Kojo, you have some thoughts on that?
Yes, I was just saying that this has actually been the center of almost all the criticism that the Electoral Commission has faced throughout the year in every decision they've made. Most of those who have assessed these decisions have come to the conclusion that the EC's focus is narrow. For the amount of money they are seeking to spend, the outcome seems narrow. The EC was bent on having a credible election for 2020. They wanted to do whatever it is to make that outcome a reality. But people were thinking beyond that, saying 2020 is not the only election we're going to have. And as an Electoral Commission, we want you to think broader than just 2020. Right. So, for example, with what Israel was just articulating, the idea that we're going to spend all this money to create a new register just because we want to get 2020 right. No one is thinking about the future. So now we've seen that they spent a fortune on biometric machines, and the international community is saying that the only thing those biometric machines did for us was that it ensured that one person cannot impersonate another in an election. Right. It didn't ensure that qualified people will vote. It didn't ensure that we can collate and count the votes
but is it
correctly.
Fair? Is it fair? I mean, every system has its own flaws. So you could say
this
that, well, they did it. They did it, but
it's not a flaw. It's a limitation of the whole thing. That is all it can do.
All right.
When you compare that to the cost.
Okay, let me bring in Joseph Opoku-Gakpo and Joseph Akable. Akable, unless you want to also stick to the Electoral Commission's, the issue with the Electoral Commission and the new voters register as your highlight, I would like to bring Gakpo in to talk about Parliament and the announcement made by the Speaker. Joseph, Akable, do you want to go for briefly on the Electoral Commission?
Register issue. Because it ended up in court eventually when we followed that issue keenly. And a number of issues came up in the courts. Essentially, the NDC was of the opinion that the current voters register, the voters card, should be used as a source document for the registration. And so that was also another major issue that came up. Later on, attempts were made to allow for other documents, including baptismal certificates and others. But the Supreme Court took the view that and the EC was acting within its mandate when it opted to use just not those documents that have already been used to generate, and rather stick to the Ghana card and use the guarantor system as well. And so I thought that was also important. Mm-hmm. The lesson from that particular episode for me was the fact that it showed how, as a nation, we're polarized on so many fronts, and there was a lot of suspicion at every turn because it was not in doubt the fact that we all agreed that it was important to have a system that was credible. What people didn't agree on was how to go about it. And so instead of the discussion focusing around how to ensure that we have an effective system such that we don't come back to it again, the discussion mainly centered on the fact that you are using a means that will favor you for whatever agenda that you intend to push. And so the main issue that we tried to resolve, we couldn't resolve it. And that's how come some people have made a point that eventually we'll come back to the square one and we'll have to compile another register. And Israel makes reference to the Ghana card system. A lot of people still do not have the Ghana card. And so hopefully in the years ahead, I agree with him that if it is implemented effectively to the level that is supposed to be implemented, we may not come back to this point. And so that particular issue was major because we had the landmark decision, the Supreme Court pronouncing on issues relating to the compilation of register yet again. And I thought that was also very important. It's in the major highlights for me.
All right, so I think I'm going to need a timekeeper right now. Looking at the time and looking at all of us with all our opinions and thoughts, I think we're going to have to manage the time a little bit. Let me bring Joseph Opoku-Gakpo in. Joseph, I'm sure that Parliament will be your highlight.
Exactly. There are two things that your highlights list that I want to draw attention to, specifically from Parliament. So.
We're looking at January to March, by the way.
It's a January to March, exactly. Yes. January to March. In fact, on the 23rd of March, the minority staged the walked out of Parliament.
Okay.
Because, that was actually their 10th walkout. Out of the 11 walkouts they've done over the last 4 years, their 10th walkout was actually on the 23rd of March. Parliament was dealing with a corporate insolvency bill, and the minority chief whip had said that Parliament didn't have a quorum, and the Speaker insisted on getting business done. Muntaka Mubarak, the chief whip, got upset. He walked out of the House. His colleagues followed him. That's not the only walkout they did between January and March. They did another one just around that same time, as far as the work in Parliament is concerned. So, in fact, on the 20th of February, that's when they walked out on President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo when he came to the House to deliver the State of the Nation address, because they said that the issues having to do with Ayahuasca West Wogan had not been dealt with, and they said that the President hadn't put the lives of Ghanaians ahead of his politicking. And based on that, they came to Parliament, they were dressed in black, the minority leader stepped out to go walk the president in alongside the other leaders in parliament. And just when he was about speaking, then they sang war songs and walked out of him, and walked out on him. All of those happened. The
speaker.
Point having to do with the speaker actually barring journalists from conducting interviews on the premises of the House, well, that received a lot of bashing, him insisting that once chamber is in session, then journalists shouldn't be covering other stories in the House. I was disappointed, first of all, that when the majority leader, Osei Mensah, raised the issue that journalists have been conducting interviews and the speaker gave that decision, no MP on the floor stood up for journalists. And I was particularly disappointed as far as the minority MPs were concerned, because in fact, the speaker got upset because the MP for Lembele, Kofi Boa, was conducting interviews with journalists on the site when the session was in the House. Unfortunately, or better still, fortunately, that was never carried through. We will still continue to do our business and get interviews done and all of that, even when the House is in session. And I'm sure the bashing that came from the media, particularly the Media Foundation for West Africa, I recall the GJ also responded. There was anger on social media in connection with that, and that virtually brought things to a close. But that was also a very key moment in the life of Parliament as far as the first quarter.
Well, we still have the whole year to go through. We're doing 365 days in what, 2 hours, less than 2 hours.
Now that we have Gakpo on, I want to ask him, looking at the Parliament we're looking forward to in the 8th from January, January 7th, are we going to have more walkouts or less?
Well, we'll probably, okay, you answer that for me briefly. Gakpo, answer that for me briefly, but I know we'll get there. Because that happened, that's going to happen in December. So we can take that up in December. But if you want to do a quick shot at it, that's fine.
I foresee more walkouts. As long as they don't have the numbers, they'll fight the issues on the floor. They'll demand for votes on issues. When they lose the votes, they'll walk out. In fact, their recent walkout, it actually comes in 3 forms. There are occasions when
the recent walkout, let's tackle that in December.
The issue at all.
Joseph, let's assume that we're still in January and March. Let's tackle the recent walkout in December. Joseph Opoku Gakpo there. Erastus Asare Donko has joined me, by the way. And at 5:30, we'll be on radio at Joy 99.7 FM. So in case you need to move out, don't worry. You can listen to us on radio. We're also on Love 99.5 FM in Kumasi, from where Erastus Asare Donko is joining in. Erastus, I think I'm going to pin this on you. The Media Coalition Against Illegal Mining criticizing the withdrawal of the Operation Vanguard Task Force. You were certainly on that beat. Looks like you're muted, Erastus.
Okay.
All right.
So I hope you can hear me now.
Perfectly.
I think that is one issue that took center. I remember very well one security personnel called me. In fact, we've been working together in the mining field, and he said that, well, it's possible that we're going to move out of the mining field. I thought he was joking. And then the next moment, it was announced that Operation Vanguard across the country were moving out. They started packing out. I thought he was joking. And then the next moment, against the war on illegal mining, I thought we've lost it, because then I asked, so who's going to replace the security men on the ground? They said they've handed over to the police. And I said, well, then that is it. And so since then, it's a free-for-all. People are mining with impunity inside the bushes and all that. So I think that is a key issue when it comes to one promise that the president himself put his presidency on the line for. And up to now, we do not know the clear way for the fight against illegal mining.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if my colleagues here in studio want to, put in a comment or two. If you can do that for me briefly. Can I trust you with 30 seconds, Kojo? You did talk about your highlights.
No, I talked about Israel's.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what's your highlight?
Well, for me, it's COVID. It's COVID.
In March.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's when it all began. Now, at the end of March, there was actually a lockdown. For me, the lockdown was the key thing, because it revealed a number of things to us. I think it was 28th of March when the president announced a lockdown. At the time, we had about 141 cases across the country, and 5 people had died. We felt the need to lock down 2 of our biggest cities, Accra and Kumasi. Yeah. In fact, they called it the Greater Kumasi area, right? Now, the thing that struck me was that we were making this decision based on the data we had. And the data we had really was for Accra and Kumasi. We didn't know what was happening in Cape Coast, Takoradi, any of the other cities. We knew what was happening in Accra and Kumasi, so we made decisions based on that.
Yeah.
And that has characterized our management of COVID-19 throughout the period.
Okay.
We make decisions based on what we know. And we do not put enough effort into finding out what we don't know.
What we don't know.
So throughout the year, our management of COVID-19 has been biased to the information or the data that we are fortunate enough to have, or the data that has fallen off the tree for us. We never went hunting for data. Once we did some sequencing of the genome of the virus, but that thing is only useful if you keep doing it, so that you can keep tracking the virus and you know when it changes.
When it's mutated.
We did it once and stopped. So we were never ahead of the curve. We were always making decisions based on what falls in our lap. And to this day...
And when you say we, you mean we as a country?
As a nation, that's right. Okay. To this day, whatever we say about how well we have handled the coronavirus...
Let me just quickly announce...
the limit of our knowledge.
Let me just quickly announce that we're just on radio now, on Joy 99.7. For those of you who are just joining us, we're taking you back into time, looking at the year 2020. We're starting all the way from January into December. We're taking it quarter by quarter, January, February, and March. And that's what we're talking about. In January, February, and March, we've been talking about coronavirus. You know, that's when we first recorded our case, our first case. In February, we talked about the illegal mining and the Operation Vanguard team that was withdrawn from across the country. The Speaker and the things that happened in Parliament, Joseph Opoku-Gakpo has spoken about it. That was, he tells us, there was the 10th walkout by the minority in Parliament. In January was when the Electoral Commission announced that it was going to compile a new voters register. And we've also talked about that. We talked about the accident that killed about 34 people. So that's January to March, if you're just joining us on radio. We'll be moving on to talk about April, May, and June. April, May, and June. I'm doing this with Israel Lai. I'm doing this with Kojo Yangsen. I have Joseph Akable joining us via Zoom. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo as well via Zoom. And Erastus Asari-Donko via Zoom. So let me quickly go through what happened in April. In April, President Akufo-Addo...
I thought I'd get the chance to say something about the Galamsey.
About the Galamsey. We're looking at the time.
30 seconds.
We're looking at the time.
And
okay.
I want to lump that together with COVID.
Okay.
So Kojo Yangsen sent me a message and he said, Ghana now, we should change our motto from freedom and justice to and we started so well too. And it's true. If you look at the case of Operation Vanguard, yes, it was a case where we started so well. And then you look at COVID too, we started so well. We'll come back to, I'm sure we'll come back and talk.
Certainly. And that's what I would say, that the resilience with which the Electoral Commission went ahead to compile the voters register and got it done, if we would transfer it to the other things that we do as a country, I think, you know, because people were against it, but we were able to go ahead and we did it. We did it. So I think we should adopt that behavior, if you like, the character. Let's go into April. April. In early April, President Akufo-Addo announced free electricity for 3 months. That's what happened in the first part of April. By May, we were enjoying, you know, free electricity, actually more free electricity, and we're told that it was costing us about 1 billion cedis. Mind you, the GRICO had been complaining about how much we owed. Electricity. We know about all the issues in the electricity sector. At this time also, the country's case count was 641 after 50,719 tests had been conducted. We're still in May. Our biggest coronavirus testing facility, KCCR, ramped up, the second biggest, I should say, ramped up staff members to clear a backlog of over 8,000 samples. So this is essentially the efforts that we're putting in dealing with coronavirus. Now, amid the pandemic, there was a problem of stigmatization. And if you remember, we brought you the story of how an 8-year-old girl was pelted with stones because her mother had contracted coronavirus. Again in May, the Bako Central MP, Mahama Yarga, announced that he felt haunted by the Special Prosecutor, Martin Amedu, who had then, you know, started doing some work. And we heard about the story where a landlord was reportedly shot a tenant dead. We're not sure the status of that particular story. we'll hear from my colleagues here. Also, in June, President Akufo-Addo announced the easing of restrictions on political activities. That has been a big, point of conversation for a lot of people. They've read all kinds of motives into the reasons, into why the restrictions were eased. Was it that we were doing better? Was it that the cases were reducing? Or was it purely, for the political season? Well, also, the Supreme Court ordered the Electoral Commission to justify its rejection of old voter IDs as requirement for getting a new one. And that, again, is another big conversation where Joseph Akablay can help us as well. Then the EC said the voter register was susceptible to manipulation, which could endanger the outcome of the December polls. I'd like you to take a look at this.
Had the Commission maintained the old register and conducted a limited registration exercise in all electoral areas and registration centers across the country, we would have estimated to conservatively, that's at the minimum, add about 2 million Ghanaians onto the existing register. And I know this is basic mathematics. 16.8 plus 2 billion will give us what? 18.8. Is that not so? So what we are saying is that without the compilation of the new voters register, the Commission was on track to register some 90 million people plus another 800,000 people who remain on the multiple list. This would have given us a total number of almost 19.6 million persons. Approximately 20 million had we maintained the old register and done the limited registration.
That's Dr. Bosman there making that announcement. So a number of issues that have appeared. First of all, electricity that we're talking about. And then we also have, more electricity and then our testing regime. And we also have, the issue of stigmatization, which came up. And then Martin Amidu, the special prosecutor, who has started his work at the time. And then by June, we're looking at all the issues that came up with the voter registration process, the Supreme Court and the order that it made, and then the announcement of ease and restriction on political activities. Let me come to those of you, our colleagues on Zoom, and take what your highlights are. You're joining us on radio on Joy 99.7 FM. We're also live on Love 99.5 FM. I'm Gifty Andopia. We're taking you back into time, looking at the year 2020. What happened from January to December? We've already talked about January, February, and March. That is one quarter. We're looking at the next quarter. We're in April, May, and June. In April, May, and June, I've given you the highlights of the issues. Free electricity, Martin Amidu's issues with Mahama Yariga, the voters registration, and the issues that came up with it, our testing regime for the COVID-19. My colleagues are joining me via Zoom. I want to take their thoughts. Let me start with you, Erastus. Which one is a highlight?
Well, I'll go for the COVID-19 and the testing regime. And at a point in time, we thought that we were doing contact tracing, especially in the Ashanti region. It was going very well until at a point where, those who were doing the contact tracing, if you realize, they went on strike. And on the ground, when you get to the medical facilities and you speak to the doctors there, they give you a different idea of what was happening concerning new infections and on the ground, how many people have been infected, the testing regimes down there, which was totally different from what we were hearing up there. And so it gave you a different sense of the disease, whether really you should take it serious or you're not taking it serious. You went to the market centers when there was a lockdown where market women were trading busily without any recourse to wearing of masks and all that. And so there was that difference you could feel, whether indeed is the disease really dangerous? Should we be paying attention to it? And what is being said up there was totally different from what was going on. And I remember Dr. Michael Owusu on our local radio station, people really listened to him a lot, digesting the issues concerning testing and how it's been done and how people can be infected, how people should behave and all that.
Yeah.
So that would be a highlight for me in the Ashanti region.
Okay. Joseph Akable, let me come to you. Shall we go to the Supreme Court and the order that it gave the EC to justify its rejection of the old voter ID cards in the new registration process?
And so the EC came to the courts by relying on a manual that it had issued some time back with regards to how it compiled the previous register to make the point that it was not watertight, and it trained its officers, the Electoral Commission itself admitting that it trained its officers in a manner that didn't ensure that they stuck to the requirements that the then CI, which regulated the registration exercise, had been used. And so essentially they were making a point that if they allowed individuals who had the then existing voters ID card to use it to register, says it was a fruit of a poison tree and it to be carried on to the new register. And so the EC did justify it to the court. The court agreed with the Electoral Commission and gave it the green light to compile a new register. And at the time, it ties in with the COVID-19 that the Rasto spoke about as well, because before the registration commenced, there were serious concerns about whether or not they could undertake the registration exercise within the COVID-19 space. And they were able to do that within a month, a little over a month. They registered close to 17 million Ghanaians. And so that was a very important exercise. And it's interesting to note that at the close of post, and even the petition issues that have come up, nothing specific relates to the issue that affects registration or in terms of ineligible people voting. That has not been an issue that has come up so far. And so the expectation is that, going forward, the EC told us that this will be the last register that they will be compiling, and they'll just be doing the continuous registration subsequently. And so we all expect that resources have been expended to put together this register, and this will be a good register that will be done. We know that government is moving to connect some of the databases already. They are doing it for the National Health Insurance card. They are adding it to the Ghana card. And so we're expecting that they should be able to, in the long term, connect it to the SNIT ID as well as passport and all of that things, so that we could have one single document that could transact all forms of business for Ghanaians, including voting. And
I remember at a point, this was a big conversation that we all had. Why don't we just stop wasting resources and channel all of these things into one avenue? But Joseph Opoku Gakpo, let me come to you, and if you do have any follow-up, you can put it in briefly, because we're doing time management. But Joseph, I think that for you it will be the Mahama Ayariga and Martin Amidu, back and forth.
Well, that was a very interesting one. Ayariga obviously always calls Mr. Amidu the
okay, looks like that.
To a large extent. But
okay, Joseph, I lost you. So do you want to sum that up for me again?
Okay, so I was only making the point that Mahama Ayariga and Martin Amidu always have back and forth, which gets interesting because it's a father and son affair. and every now and then there's something else that comes up. But the other thing I find interesting, as far as the second quarter of 2020 was concerned, has to do with the COVID-19 testing, as you rightly enumerated. COVID-19 testing in Parliament as well, both members of Parliament and staff in Parliament. Now, after the mandatory testing was done on the 26th of May 2020, there was widespread rumor making rounds that some MPs had been confirmed positive for COVID-19. And then there was a press conference by the majority leader, Chairman Sabonsu, and the Director of Public Affairs, Kita, and they denied completely that there was no COVID-19 case in Parliament. That was on the 26th of May. Well. The day after, exactly, the day after, on the 27th of May, the minority chief whip, the star boy Muntaka Mubarak, was in the studios of Joy Prime, and he spoke to Daniel Dazi, and he categorically stated that the leaders in the House and the Public Affairs team had told Ghanaians a big lie because 2 cases of COVID-19 had been confirmed as far as MPs were concerned, and 13 staff had also tested positive following the mandatory testing. So very interesting that leadership tells us a story, the chief whip in the House comes to tell us that's a complete lie on the 27th of May. And we all recall how, the public took on Parliament for virtually deceiving the public. And then the other final thing that also represented a highlight in that second quarter was on the 15th of April, again in connection with COVID-19 and whether Parliament should take a break or not, the frosty relationship between the minority and Speaker Professor Michael Quay hit a crescendo. The minority leader addressed the media briefing and described Professor Michael Quay as a walking illegality and someone who wasn't paying attention to the statutes that guide the various processes in the House. He was criticized widely by the majority side, but of course, the majority always have to have their say. And that term became very popular, a walking illegality, a description of the whole Speaker of Parliament.
I do remember that very well. So let me throw it back to Israel and Kojo Yankson here. Let me start with Kojo. Kojo, I don't know if you want to speak on the back of what our colleagues have already said concerning their highlights, or if you have your peculiar highlights and you want to, talk about. Okay.
Because to be honest, from March onwards, it became the big recurring story throughout the year. And in May, this is when we learned about an 8-year-old girl who was pelted with stones.
Stones, yeah.
Because her mother had recovered from COVID-19. Not that she was still sick, she had recovered. And that was to pelt this little girl, the children in the area, to pelt this little girl with stones. Now, you see, the thing that was interesting about this story was that Matilda Agamu, the mother of this child, was the first ever patient in the Upper East region to be diagnosed with COVID-19. She subsequently recovered. Her husband also recovered. But for some reason, this turned them into pariahs in the community. Now, I traveled all the way up to Bolgatanga to meet them, and I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed by the ignorance that was leading to the stigma in that community. People were actually, she had a shop in a market, and her fellow traders were telling customers not to buy from her because she had COVID. We've come a very long way.
We have.
From then. Today, the information that is available about COVID-19 is far more than it was back then.
Yeah.
People understand far better what the situation is. But I think it pointed out one of the early difficulties we were going to have to overcome, and that is education. Okay. We're still struggling with that. We're still in a place where people don't quite understand certain aspects of this disease. We're still trying to make sure that people get it, people do the right thing to protect themselves and others. But for some reason, almost a year in, we're still struggling to get the simple and basic message across to everybody. Of course, this led to another campaign from Joy, and we've done so many of these campaigns this year, which have all been impactful. We've had the Arrive Alive, we've had the Joy Clean campaign, we've had Up to Us, we've had the Joy Peace campaign coming up to the election, and then we had this, which was a campaign to fight stigma. And again, it was very effective. We brought people like Matilda Agamu into the fold, and they spoke powerfully to people in communities to help them understand that stigma is really even a bigger enemy sometimes than the virus itself.
How I'd love to interrogate some of these issues even further, but we have only 2 hours to do 1 year of stories. So Israel, I want to find out if you want to speak on the back of what has been said already, or if you have your own highlights. We're looking at the free electricity, and this is April, May, March, April, May, June. Free electricity, Matsnamidu and the Member of Parliament for Boko Central, Mahama Yariga, they're back and forth. Then the voter registration issues, easing of the restrictions, the Supreme Court ordering the EC to justify why it was rejecting the old voter register. Which one, is your highlight?
I'd want to go on COVID. And COVID because, yes, COVID has essentially transformed our lives, and we're living with the reality of COVID and the effects of COVID. Now, I would want to say we started off well. We did all the right things. We shut our borders, and we...
But people said that was a bit too late, that we could have shut the borders much earlier.
We could have done it earlier, but yeah, better late than never. So at the time we shut our borders, there were still other countries that had not shut their borders. So that was good.
But before we shut our borders, we were still open to China, even though the whole United States of America had shut its borders to China.
Great, but I'm saying that eventually when we did, we still shut our borders when others had their borders open. And we didn't just shut our borders, we did other things, which helped the situation. Except at some point, somewhere...
Sorry, will you include the prayer?
No, not the prayer.
But
somewhere along the line, though, and it became obvious that we lost our guard. And I feel that it really had to do with this tango between trying to get things right, but then the economic impact of locking down and taking all those measures and doing testing and all of that, because it costs a lot of money to get to do all of that. And at the same time, it also costs a lot of money if we're shutting down the economy the way we did, even though the lockdown in itself wasn't that effective. And so we ended up having a Pasha Lockdown, which really didn't give us the kind of results we're looking for. And at the time we decided to lift the lockdown to, I didn't quite agree with the timing.
And then there was the political issues with it at the same time. Kojo, you wanted to comment on that?
Something about
okay, let's make that brief. Can I trust you with 30 seconds again?
Yes, you can.
Let's
even
see.
less. I was just going to say, politicizing COVID-19 is the biggest mistake we made. For some reason, the government decided that one of their KPIs would be how many people get infected. I don't know why.
When did that happen? Hang on.
Because they started to report the numbers in a way that was most flattering, right? The most flattering way of reporting the numbers. So, these ones have recovered. These are the live
So when
cases.
they try to categorize it, but wouldn't you say that just essentially made it clearer for people, because then you know what are the active cases?
Not at all.
What are the cases we've recorded so far?
What it did was it created an incentive for underreporting. It created an atmosphere where it is better for the numbers to be low. So, by the way, in the beginning, it was free to test for COVID-19. Suddenly, you had to pay. Did nobody notice that? Suddenly, you had to pay. No matter what your symptoms are, you have to pay.
But realistically, could you, how far can the government go to, test everybody? So if you wanted to do your...
is it to government to know how many people have COVID?
If you wanted to do a personal testing, you could pay. But I think that if you were contact traced and found to be positive or anything...
Contact traced by who?
By the government, by the Ghana Health.
After a while, that stopped. That's the point.
Well, today I spoke to Dr. Patrick Abwaji. He said they are still, they haven't stopped.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this week...
There are people who are watching who had COVID, who were not contact traced.
Not contacted, that's true.
There are people who are watching who had COVID and went to the public health facilities.
And had to pay.
Okay.
Or they couldn't get their results, and so they had to go to their private labs
to pay. Okay. Well, these are some of the issues coming up, and I'm sure we'll carry them into 2021. I really wish that I could bring you back in, those of you on Zoom, so you can, maybe your thoughts on what they have just said. But maybe when we get to you with the next quarter, you can chip that in for me quickly. So let's move to July, August, September. July, August, September. In July, Don Mahama, who is the flag bearer of the NDC, chose his running mate. I mean, prior to this, there were a lot of talk, there were a lot of predictions, etc. Denano Pokwajimai finally emerged. Take a look at this.
As you may be aware, the flag bearer of the NDC just had a meeting with the National Executive Committee of the party to consult us on its choice of running mates for the 2020 general elections. And that is in line with the constitution of the party, like I've already said. The consultation has taken place. Earlier, he had consulted members of the Council of Elders of the party who had given their support for his choice of running mates. At the next meeting we just had, there's been a unanimous approval of the National Executive Committee of the choice of running mate by the flag bearer. And so I can tell you that the running mate of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama for the 2020 general election is Professor Nana Jane Agyemang.
So that was the announcement after Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyemang was chosen. This happened, in fact, in July, so many things happened. So we heard about this story that also became a topical issue, a national issue, where in the Savannah region, a mob lynched a 90-year-old woman who they claimed was a witch and killed her. Auditor General Daniel Domilevo was directed by the president to proceed on leave. This also happened in July. And the Accra Girls Senior High School, there were reports that some students had tested positive for COVID-19. And Maxwell Abuba was there. Take a look at what he put together from there.
Agitations here at the Accra Girls Senior High School, where some of the students here are demanding that they are released so they go home because they have heard news about the some of their colleagues who have reportedly tested positive for the coronavirus. Some of them are standing outside. They do not want to go to their classrooms. There were agitations earlier before we got here, but the police was actually called in to intervene in this matter. So some of them are still here. They are manning the gate, ensuring that these students who are agitated do not get out of the school compound. Yeah, I have a parent here with me.
Well, I'm here this morning to try to find out the situation, because last night we picked a feed that 6 students of Accra Girls have tested positive. And I know I have a word here. I'm a concerned parent. We have a common platform for parents. Common platform for parents. And this is the case that when we had the situation, we try to speak or to pick information from the PT executives. What is happening to our wards here? The PT executives, nobody is talking. The chairman is not talking. The secretary, who's a teacher here, also refuses to talk. So definitely, we need to come to the school and they try to speak to the school authorities as to the situation of our wards here. And when we came to the school authorities, nobody is prepared to talk. Like I said earlier, PT is not prepared to talk. Almost anybody in the Accra school, nobody is prepared to talk.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. You have a child here?
Yeah, I have a child here.
Okay.
Muhammad Umar.
Okay. So why are you here this morning?
Well, I just had information that the children in the school had a demonstration yesterday, that they were now more interested in staying there again, so they want to come home. That's why I rushed to come this morning to see what is actually going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if have you tried reaching the school authorities, and what have they been telling you?
I have not yet gotten. And in fact, the day we brought the children, since then we have been receiving numerous informations about what is going on in the school. It's very bad.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why I'm here. I've come to
That's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
If the school will not continue, then I'll be ready to pick my daughter.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So one of the police officers wants to address the parents. Let's get closer and hear what he's going to tell the parents.
But now there's a situation, so the school should be addressing this.
No, don't record me. Don't record me.
No, he's not recording you.
Don't record me.
No, it's not.
Take away. I said don't record me.
Sir, this is a public institution. This is a public institution. Whatever information you are giving here,
well, at this point, the police officer who came in the Kotobabi police station patrol car is attacking one of the media people here.
COVID-19. But I tell you what, July, August, September was packed. So we'll try and spend a little bit of time on that if we can. So I moved on from July. Let me go to August. In August, the NPP administration, of course, government launched that website, which it said would help Ghanaians to track the progress in terms of the fulfillment of the promises that President Akufo-Addo made prior to his election in 2016. Government also announced plans to construct an airport at Cape Coast. Remember how, much of a discussion that also generated. And then 15 civil society organizations questioned what they described as a lack of openness and transparency in the Ejapa deal. So within just, these 3 months, there was Ejapa, there was the launching of the websites, there was the plans to construct the airport at Cape Coast. But take a look at the Ejapa story.
We take this opportunity to call on His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo to, 1, acknowledge that though the Minerals Income Investment Fund and its special purpose vehicle may be legal without public input, It fundamentally goes against his pact with the Ghanaian people. His pact with the Ghanaian people, particularly the mining communities, to cede 20% of mineral royalties to develop the communities. 2, to suspend the implementation of the Mineral Income Investment Fund Act until all documents relating to the establishment of the special purpose vehicle and its beneficial owners have been disclosed. As concerned Ghanaians, we sought to assess the transaction documents on the Mineral Income Investment Fund Act's Secretariat, only to discover that it has none.
So that's civil society organizations complaining about the Ejapa deal. All happened in August. We're still in August, where our investigation uncovered some cocoa buying companies deployed skills that were deliberately adjusted to cheat cocoa farmers. By August, 199 people had died from COVID-19. Then we had the former Minister for Local Government, Professor Kwame Ahoy, launching his controversial book titled Working with the Rawlings. And in the same month, well, we had a sad news here at Joy FM, the multimedia group. One of our editors died. We'll talk about people, the important people that we have lost, you know, at the end of the program, so we can fit that in there. But we also asked everybody living outside Ghana who wanted to come home to pay $150 for coronavirus testing. Of course, the NDC coronavirus response team objected to that vehemently. We'll talk about that. Let me take you to September and what happened there. Gun-wielding men suspected to be members of a separatist group stormed the STC yard at Ho. You remember, we woke up to that particular story. They beat up staff and set buses ablaze in the early hours of the morning. The Volta Region House of Chiefs then accused government of failing to honor an invitation to an emergency meeting. In the same month, while it wasn't all bad, we had Jerusalem to dance to. Right? Okay, so we'll go to October later. But these are the things that happened between July and September. A lot. The NPP website, Cape Coast Airport, Ejapa, the Cocoa Syndicate, COVID deaths, Kwame Ahoy's book, our editor here at Multimedia Group's death, COVID fees of $150, secessionist activities in Volta region. And then we'll talk about the one that we danced to. But then the NDC, also remember, announced the running mates. There was a lynching of a 90-year-old woman. Daniel Domelevo was asked to proceed on leave. And then the incident with COVID-19 at the Accra Girls. I'll start at this time here in the studio with my colleagues, but we want to take a very quick break. It's a lot to digest between August, July and September. Whilst they digest that, and then we tell you what their thoughts are, let's take these messages. We'll be right back. You're welcome back to the show. This is the year in review, and we are live on Joy 99.7 FM. We're also on Love 99.5 FM. We're taking a look at the big stories, and I'm here. My name is Gifty Andopi. I'm here with Israel Lai, Kojo Yangson, Joseph Akabley, Joseph Opoku Gakpo, Erasto Sasare Donko, and yeah, we're talking about what has happened so far. We've gone all the way to July, August, September. And between July, August, and September, so many things happened. If you're just joining us, the NDC appointed their running mate or selected a running mate in that month or in that quarter. There was a lynching of a 90-year-old woman to death. Domelevo was asked to proceed on leave. COVID-19 situation, you know, sort of escalated at the Accra Girls' School. The NPP launched a website with which they said you, the voters, could track their delivery on their promises. There was an announcement to construct an airport at Cape Coast. Then the Ejapa deal came up, and there were lots of push and pulls there. The Cocoa Syndicate story that adjusted their scales. We told you that story, an investigative piece that we did here at JoyNews. The COVID-19 deaths as of August was 199. Kwame Ahoy launched his book talking about his experience working with Mr. Rawlings. We lost a colleague here at Multimedia Group, and COVID-19 fees, $150 was announced you needed to pay. Then there was the secessionist attacks in the Volta region. And then we dance to Jerusalem. All right, so I said I was going to start here in the studio. Israel, I'll start with you. Which one are you going for? We've got quite a list.
Yeah, there's quite a bit. I have 5 on my list.
Oh, wow.
I'll just touch on them.
Can I trust you with 1 minute?
Well, yeah, Japan clearly, well, it's gotten to a point where it had to be withdrawn. And I'm looking at this next parliament that we're envisaging and how Japan will fare in the next parliament. Then airport COVID fees. But okay, just a quick one on Japan. For most people, it wasn't so much about what was going to be done with the resources, but it was about how we're going to do it. And the fact that they could not trust the system to ensure that we're going to get value for money, or we're going to get what we expected from. For me, my issue had to do with what appeared to be a pension to essentially mortgage the resources of the people,
the entire country
now, so that the future, or those who our children who are supposed to come, the generations to come, will be saddled with debts. And apart from the debts, they also have nothing to fall on. So these resources that could have been available to them wouldn't be available because we have mortgaged it, or we've sold them out up front. So that's for Japan. On the airport COVID fees, well, there was a lot of noise that was made about it, but it appeared government was insistent and wasn't willing to do anything about it, even though it was proving many times that the fee was outrageous, $150.
Wouldn't it be a disincentive to, traveling, so that we limit the movement as much
traveling,
as possible?
it's not so much about those going out, it's about people coming in.
those coming in, that's what I'm saying.
But the people coming in, the people who are coming in are the ones who are coming in to boost our tourism, the people who are bringing in dollars.
In coronavirus, at that time, everybody was supposed to relax.
They're spending in hotels, they bring in forex. Okay, but apart from that, somebody is out of the country. The person went there before COVID. Maybe a student, somebody who people who don't have anything. They went there for one reason or the other. And for most people in Ghana, when we travel, we scrape to put some money together. We have to travel out just to buy our ticket, because when we go out there, we're living with family.
Yeah.
And then on our way back, then we're told that we have to come up with $150.
$150.
It was outrageous, but government insisted on it, and they've kept it running. One of the excuses that came up was that the investor had to put some money into it. But I'm asking myself,
isn't it fair enough?
If you may have put money in it. How much money do you put in it? If you look at the number of tests that they've conducted at the airport right now, multiply it by $150. Whatever investment you put into it, you'd have recovered
by now. So you think that going forward in 2020, perhaps your expectation is that the amount will be reduced?
It has to be slashed significantly. Apart from that, there has also been the argument that why didn't we let Noguchi take it up? Even if we wanted to do what we wanted to do, Noguchi, which we have said, in the cases here, which we have said that have been at the forefront. I think
you're running out of your 1 minute.
Have been at the forefront of testing, and government officials have come out to say, oh yeah, Noguchi has done so well. And then when it gets to the time to make some money, which this private person is making, then we decide to give it to a private person and ignore Noguchi. I think it was unrealistic. And then Nana Jane as running mate. I think Nana Jane as running mate was one of the best things that happened to the NDC. I think it was a fantastic choice by the NDC. And voter secessionist, well, it appears the story has gone down. I'm wondering what's happening as far as voter secessionists is concerned.
Well, I think it got drowned a bit by the elections.
And then Domilevo on leave. There was so much drama. My bit had to do with that letter that was written in reply to Domilevo, which I thought, it wasn't presidential.
It wasn't presidential.
Signed by
okay. Because of time, I'll leave it there. Maybe we'll have some time for follow-ups, then we can add more. Kojo?
For me, I think it'll be Daniel Domilevo and the PCR tests, the antigen tests at the airport. I'll start with the airport, if you don't mind. The thing about the airport tests is that we were first told about them by the managing director of Ghana Airport Companies Limited, Yao Kwakwa. He said that these tests they'll be doing at the airport will give you your results in 30 minutes, and they are 99 to 100% accurate.
Well, why is it all laughing?
$150. Yeah, because it's an antigen test. An antigen test in its wildest dreams can never be as accurate as a PCR test. Okay. And a PCR test is not 99 to 100% accurate. So how did the antigen test at Ghana Airport Company become more accurate than a PCR test? Dr. Okoboy attempted to explain, talking about something to do with some proteins. But in the end, science is science. An antigen test can never be as accurate as a PCR test, ever.
Okay.
But somehow, Ghana Airport Companies told us that it's 99 to 100% accurate.
Are you linking that to the cost involved?
I am, because it is very difficult to justify the cost. Whenever you ask authorities about it, they point to other countries that are charging more as the justification for charging $150.
Here in Ghana.
Not that it's costing them $150 to test each person, but others are charging more. I don't know when that became the standard, but for some reason, that's the only explanation or the only defense we get from health authorities when you ask that question.
And for you, that's not enough?
At all, especially since there is a huge possibility of false negatives when you do an antigen test.
Right.
You're paying $150 for this. But if you pay for the more accurate one, it's 300 cedis.
Or some, so, you know, you could pay like 500,
cedis.
Yes, or 500
So you're up to 500. Let's say it's 500 cedis,
yeah.
depending on where you are doing it. And that's the more accurate one. Okay, so it's very difficult to wrap your head around the logic there. And then we did hear one state official saying that the reason why it's costing so much is because they had to set up infrastructure at the airport for the testing to be done. Okay, they can test about 30 people at a time, and they had to set up infrastructure. So that has also gone into the cost. Noguchi also has to set up infrastructure for PCR tests. They don't do it in the air. They have to do it in a lab, a very expensive lab. KCCR has to do it in a lab. They've set up infrastructure to do that, and they can test more than 30 people at a time.
Are you with Israel when he says that going on into 2021 would expect that the cost will go down?
I don't think it will.
You don't think
I think they've got away with it. No. Nobody is putting pressure on them.
But that's what we're having the conversation, hoping that it will go. It will go down. Okay.
Because of what?
Okay. So maybe, Kojo, I know you have the other one. Let me just bring in our colleagues on Zoom right now on the back of this COVID-19 and the cost, because we're looking at going into 2021 as well. Let me come to you, Joseph Akablei. Joseph. All right. Looks like it's going to take a while. Okay, Joseph, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. So do go ahead, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to chip in your choice as well. Kojo, I haven't forgotten at all. So you have another point. Yeah, let's go ahead.
I mean, in order not to sound repetitive, I will opt for working with Rawlings. I thought it was quite an interesting piece of literature put together by Professor Ahoy for two reasons. The first is that it was a book that was written by someone who worked up close with Mr. Rawlings, someone who knew him from the onset, was through with him the PNDC era through to the NDC, the first ever NDC administration and the first democratic government under this particular republic, and also is an active player in the NDC. And so I thought it was very instructive that he put together that piece of literature. The second was the fact that it was quite controversial. And obviously for the issues that he touched on and for some of the stories and the manner by which he told the stories, including the famous Abubontoshpe aspect, which I'm sure Kojo will obviously recall, and that aspect had to do with Bidzidin. So it was a very important book. But looking back at it, and quite recently, I went over the book again, and I realized that, look, we may have been a bit too critical of Professor Ahoy, because if you read the aspect where he talks about the Rawlings ideology, it paints a picture of what many people know Mr. Rawlings to be, who is now unfortunately deceased, yet they are unable to say, is the fact that we know that he's someone who was passionate about the country and wanted things done and would go at all lengths to get those things done. And those are matters that he dealt with, despite the other issues that he talked about, him not being very focused, very smart, and all those issues that became the bone of contention. It's a very interesting analysis of the Rawlings regime, and I really believe that particular book contributed immensely to political history and will be a source of valuable material going forward. I knew Mr. Rawlings was himself working on a book that we are told had the title The Triumph of Evil. I don't know how far that particular book went, and unfortunately it's no longer with us. Hopefully his office will finish that particular book and we'll know what the man had to say about himself, his administration, and a lot of the things that were said about him. Okay, so answer this for me in 5 or 10 seconds. Do you side with Israel that the COVID test at the airport, $150, looking into 2021, should necessarily be reduced in, the cost? It's a tough one. It's a tough one. But I agree with Israel because I've read a lot from persons who have come in. I think that it should go down a bit. I mean, so say $50. Money, a lot of money has been made, and it's the time now to also try and attract people to come in, especially now that we are trying to open up a bit more, even though we still have to keep to the restrictions. So I think it should go down. Okay. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo, let me come to you with a Japa. I'm sure that's, well, I'm thinking that will be your choice. I keep choosing for you, forgive me. But you're free to, you're free to disallow.
Let me touch on a Japa.
Yeah.
And if there is a bit of time, then I'll touch on COVID-19 testing and the activities of the secessionist group.
Yes, see.
So a Japa got approved in Parliament in August. The interesting bit has to do with the fact that Parliament approved the Japa deal on 14th of August 2020, on the 13th of August 2020. So it came to Parliament around 11 a.m. in the morning. It was late in the morning on the floor around 11 a.m. It was referred to the Committee on Finance later in the day. They considered it the following day on the 14th and got it approved later that day. So, a transaction that is giving up up to 49% stake in return from the country's major mineral sources, as far as the mineral royalties are concerned, comes to Parliament. Very bulky documents. One of them is like 149 pages, if you look at the agreement document itself and all the several documents. And funny enough, within less than 48 hours, the House goes ahead to approve it, and eventually that agreement is supposed to kick in. And then in the conversation on the approval, what did we see? Papano became the subject matter and virtually became the talk of town the day or two after the approval, until a few days later, the civil society groups revived the conversation on the substance of what the Japa was about. Well, we wait to see what becomes of it, with the indication that it may come back in the life of the next Parliament. But I doubt it will end up passing. And I foresee a situation where the investors, because we know this should have actually gone on the London Stock Exchange back in December eventually. That's in around this time this year, earlier this month. I think with all the heat and the criticism, even the investors should be cautious about sinking their money into it. And it's something that probably should be allowed to die a very natural death. But in the course of that, another thing the minority did was to do their walkout once again out of Parliament on the 14th.
That was walkout number what?
The last of the walkouts we've seen.
Walkout number 11.
In the 7th Parliament.
So that
walkout number 11. You don't know what will happen between the 4th and the 6th when Parliament sits, as far as the 7th Parliament is concerned. So this may well have been the last walkout by the folks on the minority side of Parliament, as far as the 7th Parliament is concerned.
Yeah. Okay.
In 30 seconds, the activities of the secessionist groups.
Yeah.
I recall that when the first of the incidents happened, I think that was also in August, having to do with the police guy who was, I think 2 police officers were actually seized. Some vehicles were seized by the folks with the secessionist groups. I recall that the dawn that happened, myself and Joseph Akable were in the studios. I had stayed up overnight to get some work done. And then he got the calls coming through. We went down there trying to get the details of it. Eventually, when we said we were reaching out to the police commander in charge of the Tongu area, then some other guy picks up his phone and says that they are holding him hostage. Wow. And that he is holding onto the line, and that he won't get to speak to him. If you want to talk to him, the guy who is in charge, you can speak to him. We put him through, and Kojo Hansen had a very interesting conversation with him. some of these daring acts of impunity shouldn't be allowed to continue in 2021, where even police officers get seized by so-called separatist groups.
Yeah, yeah, and that works a lot on the psyche, the social psyche of the people, especially the local people in this particular area. So a lot of work has to go down there. Especially this was Aveime. A lot of work has to go down there. Joseph, thank you. I trusted you with 30 seconds. You didn't fail me like Kojo Jackson has been doing. Let me bring Erastus in, and then maybe we'll move on to the last quarter of 2020. Erastus, which one is your choice?
Well, I'll go for 3 of them if I have time to go into all of them. But let me start with a comment on the COVID-19 test. I think that amount is money for a lot of people. And in fact, what was the motive really? Was it to prevent the disease? It stopped people from spreading it from other countries, or it was just to raise money to do something else? Because you don't really get it. If the logic is to prevent the disease, then perhaps you could reduce it so that people coming in can afford, and then you will be able to stem the tide. I think this whole COVID fight is a contradiction, I must say, because you get one message from this side, on the ground is a totally different story. You get the political front, the campaigning, even when parents were restricted because they would spread the virus to their children or vice versa. We were allowing politicians to go inside the schools and to be campaigning. And so you keep asking yourself, what's the point? And even now, when we are talking about the second wave, we are still experiencing many of these things on the ground. People going about their duties with reckless abandon to the COVID protocols and all that. Yeah. Let me leave it there, but let me talk a bit about double level. Again, you ask yourself whether indeed we are ready to fight corruption in this country, and that all the talk about we fighting corruption and that every government has a plan to fight corruption, but then when you get to the people who are really going on the ground to fight corruption, the way they are treated, even other people like Manasi Azuri Awene who do some work on corruption and how they are treated and all that. So you keep asking yourself whether indeed it's just. But
the man had outstanding leave days, and he was asked to proceed on leave. Isn't it as straightforward as?
Yeah, there's been a whole lot of legal banter on this one. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't go into that area. But then, logically, when you ask yourself, if somebody is working for you and he's doing a great job, do you ask the person to go on his accumulated leave, or perhaps you forfeit it and ask him to continue working? And so, indeed, if you think the guy is working well and is doing a good job when it comes to corruption and you are interested, then I think you should give him a thumbs up and say that let the leave pass, go ahead with your job and do it. And so it raises questions about whether indeed, as a country, we really want to fight corruption. The talk on social media, the people themselves who are demanding accountability, are they really appreciative of the efforts that other people put in into fighting corruption? Then finally...
Okay, I'm going to trust you with 30 seconds on that one now.
Yes, in 30 seconds. Yeah. The lynching of the old woman, in fact, quite a sad story that if you look at the public outcry out of that, I think that we've not lost our sanity as Ghanaians, and there is more to be done. The institutions that protect the aged and children should be strengthened more to do that going into 2021.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to thank you very much. We're going to the last quarter, but there's something that we need to comment on. We'll talk about the people that we have lost in the country. But Said, one of our editors, it came to us as a shock. Erastus, you've worked closely with him. So I want to start with you. I want to take your brief comments, short comments on the demise of Said, one of our colleagues here.
In fact, it's still something that we are grappling with. Myself, I've not gotten over it yet because I tend to look at this desk right here in your shot every time, and when I get in, if not the fact that my very good friend, Kofi Adudumpe, is sitting on it now, it sends shivers down my spine. And till date, I still ask myself whether indeed he's gone, like just the wind, blowing him away like, some dust. So it's something that we're grappling with. We have still not come to terms with his death. And I think we had a great loss this year, which we're still trying to hold on to.
Okay. May his soul rest in peace. Joseph Akable, did you have any interactions with Saeed briefly?
Yes, we interacted with him many times during the morning meetings, and a few times he was always a pleasant person to interact with. I think his passing was a reminder yet again of the fact that there will be a journey that we're all embark on, and the need to value the life that we have and live in ways that leads to us achieving ultimately the purpose for which we are here to be on this earth.
Joseph Gakpo.
Yeah, a difficult conversation, so I understand why you are confusing the names. But, Saeed, I had interacted with him on numerous occasions. My family people are in Kumasi, so I pay frequent visits to Kumasi. And when I'm there, I visit Love FM. And I end up meeting Erastus and the rest of the guys. I meet Saeed himself as well. Alaji, as we all usually call him. When I first had an internship opportunity as far as radio work is concerned, back in Kumasi as Capital, thanks to Erastus as a redonko. Those days, Saeed and co were the big boys that we all looked up to as far as the journalism profession is concerned. It's a big loss. May God, gladden the hearts of his family people. And to our friends at Love FM, hopefully, may God continue to comfort you guys and all of us.
Amen. And I'm coming to the studio, Israel Lai and Kojo Youngson. Let me start with Israel.
So, Saeed, it came as a shock, I'm sure, to everyone. But I remember Saeed, when Saeed was reporting from Love FM and would hear on the midday news and on our bulletins, Saeed Ali Yaqub, Love FM, Kumasi. And he was such a pillar for us in Kumasi, and it's clearly a great loss.
Yeah. Kojo?
He was a reflective person. He thought a lot, and he would measure his words. He's one of those people who was so respected because every contribution he made to a meeting was impactful. He knew so many people, was respected by so many people. When Saeed takes us around in Kumasi, we are treated like royalty. And I will always miss, that gentle, affable, but deeply intelligent, thoughtful man.
Yeah.
May his soul rest in peace.
I'll take humility. He was a very humble, humble man.
On the back of that, I just want to chip in some information. So I've just done some math, and the airport COVID tests, they've done 112,000 tests.
Okay.
At the airport.
Multiplied by 1,150,
that's $16.8 million. $16.8 million.
Oh, wow.
So
do you want to convert that to cedis?
I don't even want to.
No, let's convert that to cedis.
Whatever money was invested, whoever invested whatever in the infrastructure should have long recovered it by now.
Okay, so we're still sticking to the argument that by 2021, one of the things we're expecting is for the COVID-19 test at the airports to be slashed. Let's see how that goes. So that is July, August, September. A lot happened, really, a lot. We're going to the last quarter of 2020. We'll wrap it up very shortly. If you're just tuning in, this is the year in review here on Joy 99.7 FM, also on the JoyNews channel on your multi-TV, and free to air also on DSTV 421, GoTV 144. We're also on our social media handles. We're going to October. Now, Member of Parliament from Fansaman constituency, Eko Kwansa Hayford, was killed in what police treated as robbery, armed robbery. In December, his wife, we'll get to that month, by the way, his wife contested the seat there on the ticket of the NPP and won. And then police investigations revealed that UG Law Professor Yao Bene was murdered by his cleaner and another person after he resisted being robbed. By the way, the prime suspect being held in that case also died. Take a look at Eko Kwansa Hayford's wife and what he did in the December elections, and then we'll move on to what next happened in October.
Napa. They shall about what to and imagine it would there indeed if Fantimana to Fantimana. Asha Fantiman and Yam. Ain't Madame Fantiman Funina say. Namasha one body. I reshema when you want to the map by Yamami. You got to have one honorable one, the show honorable airport, Pansa Airport. Ninuma Panado. We are proud of you.
Month of October, Asin Central MP Kennedy Japan faced the charge of contempt of court after allegedly insulting a high court. We have Joseph Akabli to help us with that. Along the line, we're told that he had COVID-19 complications, so couldn't come to court. And election campaigns shifted into fifth gear. In the same month, dozens of people were displaced following floods that were triggered by torrential rains in the northeast region. Kojo talked briefly about that. And the Finance Ministry suspended floating of the Ejapa royalties shares after pressure from civil society platform on oil and gas. Let's move on to November. In November, the EC boss, Jean Mensa, announced that the results of the 2020 elections would be announced in 24 hours, which became a key theme in our election coverage. Former President Gerry Rawlings passed on. Like I said, we'll talk about all those people who we have lost in the year 2020. And research by various institutions, including the Political Science Department of the University of Ghana, showed that the NPP would win the 2020 presidential election. In the same month, Martin Amidu resigned, citing the president's attempt to influence his decisions on his corruption risk assessment of the Ejapa deal. The Electoral Commission also came under criticism for publishing details of 17 million Ghanaians online ahead of the elections. And there were even talks that it wasn't the Electoral Commission that actually did the publication. All the way to December, we had our elections. President Akufo-Addo emerged winner. But, you know, the NDC and John Mahama are saying that it was a stolen verdict. They're challenging that in court. At least we know that 5 people died. Okay, so that is it for October, November, December. Before we go through who has what choice, Kojo, you wanted to make a point on Domelevo.
A very quick one, actually.
Yes.
So that whole confusion about Mr. Domelevo being asked to proceed on leave turned into a big learning opportunity for Ghana. We all got to learn the labor law, you know, and one thing became a point of debate.
Okay.
Leave, is it an entitlement or an obligation? Is it that you must do it, otherwise you have broken a law? Or is it an entitlement that you can decide whether you want to use or not? One thing is clear, you cannot carry it forward. You cannot exchange it for money. Those things were made clear. A lot of people didn't know it. So
what I know is that you're entitled to it. You can take it. You are obliged to take it, you know, in the year, but you can also negotiate with your employer.
We read the Public Service Commissions Act. We also read the labor law, and it became quite clear that even though they say different things, the law, which should supersede any, you know, other subsequent regulation, the law said that you are not supposed to exchange it for money. Okay, you can't negotiate with your boss and exchange it. That's what the law said. We learned that. But for me, the interesting thing was this: he was forced to go on leave, and the question is leave an entitlement? Or is it an obligation? So if I am entitled to free health care, does it mean that by the end of the year I haven't fallen sick, my employer must instruct me to go to a hospital and seek some service because I'm entitled to it? It's the same for leave, isn't it? If it's an entitlement, according to the law here, it says, in any undertaking, every worker is entitled to not less than 15 working days leave with full pay in any calendar year of continuous service. And that's sub-part 1 of part 4 of the Labour Act. And this is the very first paragraph, 2021. Okay, that's what I just read. All right, so if it's an entitlement, then why was Mr. Domelevo forced to go on leave, forced to take an entitlement? Why? I still don't know the answer to that.
Well, if you follow the Ghanaian politics, you know that it happens a lot when governments change. You know, people are asked to proceed on leave. It's really not.
But we now know it's wrong.
I'm just adding a little information.
So,
to
just
that.
on the back of that, in any private organization,
30 seconds,
any serious organization, actually, you realize that they don't let people go on leave for so long.
Yeah.
Unless you're not valuable to the organization. If you're not valuable to the organization, you may as well have been fired.
Okay.
Organization.
Okay, so we're doing the last We have less than 15 minutes to go, and we still have the people who died. You know, we want to talk a little bit about them, you know, pay some homage. But we're looking at October, November, and December. And there is a Japan deal. There is what happened with the politics of the central region, Kwanza Hayford, you know, also a security issue. There is Professor Bene and his death and all that happened afterwards. There is the Upper East and the, you know, part of the northern Ghana that got flooded. There's also the story about Kennedy, Japan, you know, and the contempt case, etc. And there's the Electoral Commission, you know, 24 hours. I want to start with you, Joseph Akablay. Let's see if we can do a little bit of Kennedy, Japan, and maybe a bit of that there. But feel free to choose any of these.
Was quite interesting. Interesting because of the kind of person that Mr. Japan is and the image that he has couched for himself. And post-elections, you've seen comments that he's made are relative to Mr. Mahama, as well as Johnson Esiedike and other officials of the NDC, and people have made a call that he ought to have been arrested by the police and processed for court because of the threat of destroying properties which he issued on that particular TV platform. And so this recent election period ignited discussions again about the contempt issue and how it's panned out eventually. I mean, the big question everyone is asking is that what has become of it? The Supreme Court eventually said that Justice Amos Wuntawuni should not proceed to hear the matter anymore, and the case should be assigned to a different judge. I have been trying to follow up on that particular issue since then. I've not gotten any information as to another hearing that has taken place since that particular directive was given. And so it remains an outstanding issue on my book that will be taken into the 2021 year, hoping to find out what becomes of it, because the comments that were made affected the judiciary in a manner that many thought was inappropriate. Mr. Japan himself wrote a letter to the Chief Justice apologizing, and so for him to subsequently make such comments again left people worried and asked that, I mean, if maybe the court had allowed the matter to be dealt with as it ought to, maybe that may not have happened. But then again, it's a reminder that we need to respect our institutions, and the institutions again need to step up and deal with such matters in a manner that instills confidence and also encourages people to be conscious of the things they see against them. The other issue was with regards to Professor Yao Bene. Yeah. The case is still in court. There are two persons standing trial. You recall one other individual who was arrested died while in the custody of the police, and that also led to a whole lot of stories about how they were being attacked by spirits and all those things that came up that we cannot, verify. But the worrying aspect of it is, till date, the narrative that we have been told is the fact that it was a robbery. One of the individuals worked with him in the house, and they were simply trying to steal money from him, and they murdered the professor. It was a sad story. It's one story that will forever be in my mind going into the new year, and hopefully the trial will go on and it will terminate at the high courts, and whatever decision that the court reaches, it will at least bring some finality and establish the facts of what exactly happened and whether indeed the two individuals are responsible. One of them is actually still ill and has not showed up in court on more than 3 occasions, and he's not very well, and so we're just hoping that he also recovers and is able to show up for trial. Else, then again, we've lost the main suspects who are named individuals as his co-accused persons, and now the other person is also unwell.
And I recollect that the individual who died had, at the last minute or so, when they were just about to take him to court, indicated that he had other names, of people who were allegedly involved, and then the police had to take him back there. There was also an issue about Professor Bene writing a book, and that the content of the book was, this was information available to us here at JoyNews, that the content of the book was a bit damning, and so there was a suspicion. I asked this question. I asked the Director General of CID whether or not this is a theory they're working with. He told me that they know about the book. They actually had a copy, he said, but we haven't heard that come up again. Joseph, thank you for your thoughts on that. Let me perhaps bring you, Joseph Opoku Gakpo, into this. So we have a lot of things also that happened in Parliament, including the suspension of the Ejapa deal as well. But I have a list of the stories here. Feel free to go for any of them.
So I'll touch as well on a few other things that happened in Parliament worth highlighting. But so the Infantimana MP was killed on the 9th of October 2020 while she was returning from a campaign as constituency. A few days later, the Interior Minister, Gerry, got summoned to Parliament by Professor Michael Quay to respond to questions on what was being done to ensure the security of members of Parliament. And on the 13th of October, there was the announcement from the Interior Minister that MPs will henceforth get police bodyguards. Each of them would have armed police bodyguards, which will then transcend into the 8th Parliament, even after those who are existing in the 7th Parliament. And then he announced additionally that in total, about 800 police people are being deployed to provide protection for MPs. So they would have 3 police bodyguards, 2 of them serving in their homes, 1 during the day, 1 in the night, and then there'll be the one who would be with him on his round. So that announcement came on the 13th of October. We all saw the public reaction to that and the demand that deal with the general security situation rather than focusing attention on those who are considered the better class as far as society is concerned. It's again in this quarter that the gentleman who is currently the most important member of Parliament elect in Ghana, Andrew Amakwesi-Ama, was expelled from Parliament. It actually happened on the 7th of November, which was a Saturday. The Speaker was acting on a letter that the MPP had written to him, that he had been expelled from the MPP. The MPP asked that the constitutional provisions be invoked, so he be expelled from Parliament because he's no longer a member of the party on whose ticket he came to power, and to Parliament for that matter. Now we've all seen what has become. The stone that was rejected is now the cornerstone, and the gentleman Akufo-Addo, President, said he will not work with is the individual he's been forced to work with. 2 final things that happened in Parliament, very interesting points.
Okay, I'm trusting you with 1 minute now because we have less than 8 minutes to go.
That's fine, 30 seconds. Okay. The first ever private members bill in the history of the legislature. Usually any bill that gets passed in Parliament has to come from a minister on behalf of the president, since God knows when. On the 18th of December, the first ever bill proposed by MPs got passed into law. And, you ask yourself, why can't MPs propose legislations to become law? And why has it taken us, 28 years of parliamentary democracy to get there? Baras Mubarak led the charge and that allowed for that. And then, your good friends on the minority side clashed with the police on 22nd December. They broke through a police barricade, marched to the AC headquarters.
I don't know, when you mention that story, everybody seems to be laughing, and I'm wondering why they're laughing.
It's because
I'm sure they're looking forward to seeing more of that in the 8th Parliament.
Hopefully not. Kojo is saying it's because you said they are my good friends. All right, just a wrap-up for me.
They are the good friends of Kojo Yankson and Israel. I'm not hanging you.
No, I just want to make sure that nobody is going to say we're laughing at the minority members. We're not. We're laughing at the description that there are some people's good friends.
The joke is clear. How are you explaining it?
Okay, I don't want any problem in 2021. Okay, let's go on.
You see, in Chi, it's a joke, and you are forced to explain further and provide further.
Okay, let's go ahead. We're running out of time.
Essentially, it was an interesting quarter. The election unfolded. We know who the president-elect is. The results are being challenged. We wait to see what 2021 will bring as far as the general political space is concerned. Gichi, in 30 seconds, I think, in 30 seconds, okay. I think in that quarter, what Nana Konadu-Agyemang Rawlings had campaigned for all this while, that let's put people above the politics. I think that in the final quarter of 2020, we saw a situation where politics was repeatedly placed above the people, which for me was pretty sad. Through the campaigning, ignoring COVID regulations, taking on people for, not adhering to it, but the politicians disrespecting those regulations. It
was a big deal for you in 20. It was a big deal for you. I see that you're getting worked up. Don't worry. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. Erastus, let me bring you in before I come to Israel and Kojo here in the studio. Erastus? Okay. So let me come to you, Israel and Kojo. Let me start with Kojo.
Okay. For me, 2 stories, and I can do them very quickly. The first one, of course, the floods in the north. This was a humanitarian disaster. 4 regions were affected. hundreds of communities in each region. Displaced people, children who couldn't find one meal to eat after their homes and their parents' farms had been washed away. And these people had no options, nowhere to turn. They're Ghanaians like you and me. Suddenly, they found themselves destitute. And we couldn't, in good conscience, just watch that happen. And I have a confession. The day that we actually announced that we wanted to do something to help the people, that I wanted to go there and see what had happened, we hadn't had it. You know, we have procedures here. We have to have a discussion. You have to have things approved before you can take a trip. We hadn't done that. And I went ahead and said, I want to go and see these people. Luckily for me, management felt the same way. So after I made the announcement, I had to then quietly sit and wait for management to go through the proper procedure, and then we were approved to go. And thank God, you know, that happened, because now we've been able to, you know, make such an impact on them. Martin Amidu resigning is the last thing. I can't talk much about it.
Big story.
All I want to say is this. It was an example of why our democracy still has some way to go. And let's not feel bad about it, but let's work on growing. Because in any other democracy, if the immediately resigned special prosecutor accuses the president of what is essentially corrupt activity, an investigation would automatically be launched. And we would find out what is true and what is not true. That did not happen in this case. And it just shows that we have a certain gap in our democratic processes that we need to plug. And I think that's all I'll say on that story.
Okay.
All right, so I'll take Martin Amidu. I think it's a shame that he has resigned, and we wouldn't have that guy who everybody else thought was the best person to take up that job. We don't have him. The unfortunate thing about it is that whoever comes or is appointed to replace him is not going to have the same kind of the people are not going to have the same level of confidence that they had in Martin Amidu.
Will the office ever be the same? I mean, will it actually achieve what we wanted?
I doubt. You see, you may even get someone who is quite capable, and probably even more capable than Martin Amidu. But whatever that person does, people would want to look at it and be suspicious and wonder, really, is that actually the case, or could it be that the person is just doing something to pander to people's interests, you see, or to please some politician? So that's a challenge I feel we're going to have with the Office of the Special Prosecutor. My other story has to do with the election, of course. And the election, we know who is the president-elect now. The fact that it's being challenged. My issue is the attacks on the media, and what we saw, one political party attempt to demonize the media and rally people against them, incite their followers against the media. I think it's a shame, because we have been the guys who have been around. We've been doing this for several elections, and we have done our jobs as has been expected of us. See, there's stories that we can't tell, but what multimedia has done for this country when it comes to declaration or projecting.
Even general
projecting, but I'm focusing on justice. That what we have done in this country to save this country, that story will one day be told, not now.
Okay, so it's well, you'd have thought that 2 hours, you know, was such a long time, but it isn't. We've been able to put the year in 2 hours. Right now,
not satisfactorily though.
I know. I can't help it. I can't help it. But I mean, at least we've had your thoughts and your perspectives on I think the big stories. We want to leave you with this: the people that we lost. You know, the key people in society that we lost. It's not like if you didn't have your name here, you're not a part of the key members of society. Gerry Rawlings, of course, he died. Just in December. He was Ghana's longest-serving head of state. He was 73, also the founder of the opposition National Democratic Congress. You have Kojo Uswe-Free, as John, as we called him. You know, there's a lot of information, but I don't have time to run through that. It talks about his work as Chief Executive Officer of the Forestry Commission and where he previously worked at the GNPC. So, John, may his soul rest in peace. Jacob Plantford, the professor who was the rector of the Ghana College of Physicians and Surgeons, a nephrologist at Komfanochi Teaching Hospital and a professor at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. He died on Good Friday. May his soul rest in peace. Eko Kwansahe, for the Member of Parliament for Mfantseman. We've talked a bit about him already. Professor Samuel Kingsley Boche and Ebi Asante. He also died this year. May his soul rest in peace. Dr. Richard Kisse, he was a renowned surgeon at the Trust Hospital in Accra. The hospital announced that he passed after contracting COVID-19. Very sad story. A lot of people know him and how much he contributed to this country. Anthony K.K. Sam, he was the Chief Executive Officer of the Second Takoradi Metropolitan Assembly. He also died from COVID-19. May his soul rest in peace. Professor Emmanuel Yao Bene, we've spoken a bit about him as well. He died in his Adringano mansion. Actor Bishop Bernard Nyako is a Kumasi-based actor. His death also made a lot of news. May his soul rest in peace. And then the mother of Gerry John Rawlings, Madam Victoria Agbotui, there. Well, this will not be a part of it. And then, yeah, Most Reverend Dr. Samuel Asante Entry. He was the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the National Cathedral Project and former Methodist presiding bishop. He passed away on September. Justice Paul K. Jasso, so a judge of the Court of Appeal, he died on July 2020. So this is where we leave you, but I want to take concluding thoughts from my colleagues here who, of course, want to start on Zoom and bring it home. I don't know who to start with. Maybe I should start with Erastus Asaridonko in Kumasi.
I must say that what I wanted to say early on was that the issue of security, especially in the Ashanti region, many people died. We are yet to get to the bottom of those deaths. The ladies whose bodies were dumped at the bridge, those who were gunned down and all that. I think the security is well equipped going into 2021 to be able to unravel some of these mysteries and be able to solve more murders. So I think the more we do that, we'll have some confidence in them. We'll be able to quell those ones as well.
Okay, I need to let you go on that, Terrasos. Thank you, Joseph. We really run out of time. Make it brief. Joseph Opoku Gakpo.
We're looking forward to what the next parliament will bring. It will all begin on the dawn of 6th January with the election of a new speaker. 137-1. It will not only be exciting, it will be action-packed. We will bring it all to you as and when we tell folks.
Thank you very much, Joseph Akable.
I look forward to the election petition in the next 42 days. Let's see what happens.
I like that brevity. Israel Kojo.
Okay, so for me, quickly, you pointed out a number of people who died in the year 2020. And one of the things that stood out, you could tell COVID was running through most of them, except in some cases, you had the people willingly say that, yes, the person died of COVID. In other cases, it was shrouded in secrecy. I feel that we should do a lot more, let the people know that these people died. It will get other people to take COVID a lot more seriously.
More seriously. Kojo?
Yeah, I think 2021 is just going to be another opportunity for multimedia to demonstrate our independent, credible, fearless and peerless journalism, and I look forward to being a part of that.
I look forward to seeing you all on the other side of 2021. My name is Gifty Andopia. We've been on here on JoyNews on DSTV 421, GoTV 144, on Joy 99.7 FM and on Love 99.5 FM. Many thanks for your time. We'll bring you JoyNews Prime with the man Israel Lai. Many thanks. Happy New Year.